Managing migration flows into and within the European Union, a crucial European Parliament election issue. Hello and welcome to People First, the EPP Group's monthly program on issues with impact on people like you. Joining us to answer some of your questions is Manfred Weber. He is a member of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs here at the European Parliament, and he's also a vice president of the EPP Group. Welcome to the show, Mr. Weber.
Thank you very much.
We're going into some European Parliament elections. How difficult is migration an issue in the campaign?
Well, I would say on the one hand, the economic situation is an important point inside of the election, during the election campaign. And the second important question is really migration. And it's a very emotional question, migration. There we are talking about identity. There we are talking about perspective for the future when jobless people are seeing migrants coming and so on. It's really a very emotional question. And so we have to deal with it very seriously.
Well, let's look at a few more details on this issue in our report before we go to the questions. Here's our report. Migration has been a complex and often controversial issue for the European Union. Debate has intensified this year as work restrictions for Bulgarians and Romanians expired. That has sparked fears among some of a wave of migrants from the EU's two poorest countries. The UK has tightened up its welfare system to prevent what some call benefit tourism. The European Parliament, however, approved a resolution calling on EU governments to respect the freedom of movement as a fundamental right. Meanwhile, conflicts in Africa and the Middle East have sent thousands of refugees to European shores, some perishing in their attempts. Others arrive as economic immigrants. Europe faces the difficult task of determining which are true asylum seekers and which are illegal migrants. Another issue, how to assist countries on the front line, receiving immigrants such as Italy, Greece, and Malta. Frontex is one EU program helping in the effort. And a final issue, Malta's program offering citizenship to those who pay and invest more than €1 million. The EPP Group backed a European Parliament resolution calling on Malta to alter that policy some call citizenship for sale. Citizenship for sale on this last issue. There's some in Malta that are arguing, well, look, the government wants to raise €1 billion with this program, people paying in, to help offset the cost of the poor refugees because they're a frontline state where all the refugees, a lot of refugees are arriving on their shores. What do you think?
Well, it's not acceptable to mix all the issues on the table. Principally, citizenship means you're belonging to a society, you're belonging to a state. It's a question of feeling part of something. It's a question of identity, of a cultural identity and so on. And sometimes to being proud of a historical situation and so on. So this is citizenship in a European sense. And you couldn't sell such a citizenship in this sense. So we here as EPP, we are strongly against this proposal from Malta, and hopefully the pressure from the European Parliament during the debate in the European Parliament brings a lot of pressure to Malta that the government is really changing the proposal.
Now, Malta is one of those so-called frontline states when it comes to immigration. Here's a question, our first Vox Pop question is related to that.
Hello, my name is Tim and I'm from Slovenia, and I would like to know how the European Union defends its borders.
Now, I mean, how effective is Europe in preventing illegal immigration and at the same time keeping the door open to those asking for asylum and merit asylum?
Yeah, you're describing the two sides of the same medal. On the one hand, there is a border, and the Europeans must have the right to say, you come in and you have not the allowance to come in. So there is a border, and like at home, when you're having your door at home, you could say to a visitor, okay, please come in, or you could say, please go away. So this is the right of a state, of a European Union to defend the border. And principally, the European Union is doing a lot in the border control. We have Frontex, what you mentioned in the statement and so on. There's Frontex is working very good and strongly together. And we have to work more on this question of that the member states who are doing the main job in the border control are working more closely together, because we have today a very separate approach that each member state is doing whatever he wants to do,
right.
And we need more cooperation.
More cooperation. And Frontex you mentioned, here's a question related to that.
Hallo, mein Name ist Valentina, ich komme aus Wien. Denken Sie auch, dass die südlichen europäischen Länder von Europas Seite zu wenig unterstützt werden?
Okay, Greece, Italy, Malta, they're all facing a lot of difficulties. Lampedusa, everybody knows Lampedusa, the Italian island that is constantly being overrun. Are they getting enough help on the EU level?
Well, the current problems on the Mediterranean Sea side of Europe are obvious. So there is a big problem and it's a big challenge for us, and we have to face this challenge. But when you look on the figures, then you see that, for example, member states like Sweden, France, Belgium, Germany are having much more refugees and much more migrants who are coming to these member states, like to Italy and Spain, for example. So it's not a question of geography, it's really a question of figures when you have a look on them. Each member state has its responsibility and they have to accept the European legislation. And concretely in the Lampedusa case, in the Italian question, where we have this tragedy, I must clearly say that the European law is very clear. Each refugee must have the right to ask individually for asylum when he wants to ask this. So you couldn't send a ship completely with full of refugees back home to Libya or something like this. It's not acceptable from an European legislation point of view.
Okay. Now let's shift our gears from immigration to internal migration. And of course that issue was brought to the forefront by the end of restrictions on Bulgarians and Romanians. But other people are thinking about that as well, and there are some young people we talked to about that. Here's a question from one of them.
Hello, my name is Shay. I'm from Ireland, and I would like to know how much I can be supported if I want to move from one state to another in Europe.
He's also kind of asking, what sort of government, state support can I get in looking for work in another country? How does that work?
Well, freedom of movement is a right for those citizens inside of the European Union who wants to ask for work or who have enough money for that they have no need to have an access to the social welfare system of other member states. So it's not a right for traveling inside to other member states to get an access to social welfare system. So that's not the right. So it's clearly limited, and I think there is a need to do this.
Okay, and what about non-Europeans? Here's one.
Hi, my name is Cameron and I'm from New Orleans, and I would like to know if a non-European can get Social Security benefits if they lose their job.
Okay, Cameron is a teacher, and she is, is her kind of job the kind of job that the EU would allow a non-European to come in and perform?
Well, first of all, when a non-EU citizen wants to come to the European Union, wants to work here, then she or he needs a permission for doing this. So there is a need to get a permission. And that's a question of the member states, because the labor markets inside of the European Union are totally different. For example, in Germany and Austria, there is a need of more workers because there is a good economic situation. In Italy, obviously not. There is no need for new workers.
But different countries need certain kinds of workers then, yes, right? Yes. So that depends.
That's the definition of the national politicians, national governments. And in this case, when somebody is working here, which has a permission and is working here and is going jobless, then it's clear that they have the full access to the social welfare system because they paid in the past to the social welfare system in France, in Poland and so on. So that's clear that they will have access to the social welfare system.
The final question is, in this coming election, parliamentary election, populist parties are obviously trying to get mileage from the issue of migration, immigration. How do you deal with that issue without risking sounding like them?
Well, the biggest mistake we could do is to try to copy populists. If you're copying populists, then the people will always vote for the original party, not for a bad copy. And the answer from serious politicians must be to defend principles, to argue for principles like the freedom of movement. It's a big thing for Europe that we have this right. And on the other hand, we have to tackle the problems. We have to talk about the problems. There is misuse of some of the rights. There is misuse inside of the European Union. And we have to solve these obviously on the table lying questions. So these, I think, the answers stand to the principles, defend the principles for young people, for people who are looking for jobs. But in these specific small cases where there is misuse, let's work again.
Very sensitive issue for any policymaker, and especially ahead of these elections. Manfred, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for now on People First. Find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Until next time, thanks for watching.